Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, you're checking out an updated Stamina Sorcerer PVE build for the Elder Scrolls Online Stonethorn DLC, and this is a good one. What we've got here is a simple, easy to play 1-bar DPS build for the Stamps Orc with absolutely massive damage using only 3 skills and an ultimate. I will say this is probably the easiest DPS build ever, though you can obviously use 2 skill bars to increase the damage even further, and we'll be showing both versions in this video. As usual, we'll be going over all the stats, gear set options, skills, champion points, and rotation to make it work, and all of that is coming up next. All right, everybody, here we are back on the Stamina Sorcerer, this time with a PvE DPS build. Easy 1-bar rotation with some options for 2 skill bars. Like I said in the intro, this is probably the easiest build I've played in quite a while, and the damage is very, very good. So let's take a look at the 1-bar setup first, and all we really have to buff is our potion. I might as well buff Hurricane as well, just to see the full buff stats. Here we go, 9,000 max Magicka, 19,000 max health, and about 35,000 max stamina. 1,100 stam recovery, 5,100 weapon damage, 50% weapon critical. Those all go up quite a bit, by the way, for the 2-bar version. Or with group buffs, you'll be closer to like 6k weapon damage and well over 60% weapon critical. Resistances do go up, obviously, with Hurricane, though this is basically a group build. It's not a solo build. So keep that in mind. You should be running with a tank, at least on this setup. Of course, we've got 64 points into stamina. Running the Shadow Mundus for increased critical damage. And then Blue Food, max health, max stamina would be ideal, though you can always run something like Dubious Cameron Throne if you need a little bit of extra stam recovery. Now in terms of the potion, weapon power potions are going to be ideal on the 1-bar setup, and actually the 2-bar setup as well, because this gives you both weapon damage and weapon critical, which we're not going to be getting from our regular skills. So keep that in mind. That is ideal for this build. And then in terms of the race, in terms of the best damage, I should say, your number 1 option is going to be the Orc. That's, of course, because you get 2,000 max stamina, you get extra health, which is actually great for DPS builds, and then the Swift Warrior passive is excellent. You get the extra 258 weapon damage, plus some extra movement speed while sprinting and cost reduction. Cannot go wrong with Orc. Of course, Dark Elf is going to be a close second in terms of overall damage output. And then Khajiit is not bad because we do have the extra critical on Khajiit. And in terms of sustain, if you're having issues with that, Wood Elf and Redguard are some of the best options for that. So that is the basic setup. Let's talk about the gear next. Starting with our first 5-piece set, I'm going with New Moon Acolyte on the Stamina Sorcerer. Now, New Moon did get a nerf in the Stonethorn DLC. Keep that in mind. You don't have the full weapon damage anymore. This now gives you 401 weapon damage. I believe it was like 480 or 470 something before. So it did see a nerf in Stonethorn, but I think it's still good for a few types of builds, and Stamina Sorcerer is going to be one of the best. Okay, a couple reasons for that. Stamina Sorcerers already have cost reduction. So the extra cost of your active abilities by 5%, you really aren't going to feel it on a Stamina Sorcerer. As well as that, we are going to be using the new Crystal Weapon skill, which has a 10% cost reduction tied to using that skill. So even though we have some extra cost on our abilities running New Moon, you'll actually have much more cost reduction overall due to our Stamina Sorcerer passives and skills. Now, other than that, I also like New Moon for the physical penetration. On the DPS build, physical penetration is very important. This basically lets your damaging abilities do as much damage as possible, getting them as close to that tooltip as possible, because it reduces the enemy's armor, letting you do more damage. So the fact that this has a line of physical penetration means that you can put your champion points elsewhere, and you can do more damage in other places. Of course, we also have the weapon critical and then the weapon damage. So overall, I think it's still a good set if you're going to run it on Stamina Sorcerer. I would recommend it. Of course, you do have other options. If you're over this set or you just don't want to get it, Briarheart's going to be a good option. But remember, Briarheart has a cooldown. So about a 5-second cooldown, in fact. So that's why I went with New Moon Acolyte, because it's going to be up 100% of the time, especially on the 1-bar setup. So we're going to use that on the weapons and jewelry. I went with a 2-handed build for this DPS setup. I like 2-handed. Gives you some options as well, some flexibility. If you want to run 2 skill bars, you can actually run Executioner to get an execute on your Stamina Sorcerer. So that's why I like 2-handed. The Greatsword is very nice because through the passives, you do get increased damage. Then we're going with the Precise trait just to make our crit chance as high as possible. And in terms of the jewelry, since this is crafted, you can make these in whatever trait you want. But just in terms of my testing on the Stamina Sorcerer, I feel like Infused is a little bit better than Bloodthirsty in most cases. Infused gives you the extra weapon damage all the time, whereas Bloodthirsty gives you scaling weapon damage the lower your target's health is. So I've found that Infused is just a little bit more consistent across the board, so I'm running triple Infused, all weapon damage enchants for my New Moon Acolyte jewelry. Second set, we're going to go with Aegis Caller. This is a dungeon set, so it does require farming, but this is one of the best non-trial DPS sets in the game for stamina builds. If you're not familiar with this, this gives you weapon damage, stamina recovery, weapon damage again, and when you deal critical damage, critical melee damage, I should say, you're going to summon the Aegis Caller, which is basically a damage over time effect, does massive, massive damage with a very slight cooldown. So, like I said, this is the best non-trial DPS set I think you can get currently, and I am just running this on my armor pieces. So we've got the boots, legs, hands, waist, and chest. I think that's probably going to be the easiest way to set this up. And of course, you've got max stamina enchants on everything, and divines will be your best in slot trait. Not only that, I feel like this just fits the theme of a Stamina Sorcerer because it summons basically like an Atronach, an Air Atronach, which looks amazing. I wish we had this as an ultimate, but right now you can only get it from this set. So definitely check that one out. And then in terms of the monster sets, you do have some options here. Just a very good overall DPS build. For stamina melee builds, it's going to be Selene. This gives you a 1-piece stamina bonus and then a ton of proc damage with group buffs. This will be easily over 20k physical damage every 4 seconds, so it has a very short cooldown as well. That means you get some pretty decent overall DPS just from running this monster set. So medium on these pieces as well, medium helmet, medium shoulders. Again, stamina for the enchant, divines for the trait. If you can get it, those are your best in slot traits for this setup. So that is the 1-bar setup. We got New Moon on the weapons and jewelry. You've got Aegis Caller on the body, and then Selene monster set. Let's talk about the skills next. On the 1-bar setup, remember I said this was extremely easy. Some of these skills we're just using them passively. You don't even have to click on them. But let's talk about our buff here, Hurricane. This comes from the Storm Calling skill line. That's the second ability here. And Hurricane is the stamina morph, so you will want this one. This does AoE damage over time. It'll also give you some speed and some armor benefits while having the buff active. So just a great overall skill. It gives you a lot of benefits for one cast. Keep in mind with this, it has a 15-second duration, but the damage actually increases every second for those 15 seconds. So you do not want to cast this early. That's what we'll talk about in the rotation. You want to try to keep this up for the full 15 seconds and then recast it, because that final hit is going to have the most damage. So just keep that in mind. You want to keep it active as long as possible. Then next we've got Barb Trap. This is from the Fighters Guild skill line. This is right here, our last ability in the Fighters Guild. And this is just giving us a very solid damage over time, as well as the Minor Force buff. So Minor Force is something, if you're not familiar, you pretty much need this on any DPS build because it is going to give you 10% bonus critical damage for the duration of this buff. So you need some source of Minor Force, and Barb Trap is a super easy way to get it, both for stamina and even Magicka builds. So we are going to be running that even on the 1-bar setup for the 10% increased damage. Next up, our main spammable is the new Crystal Weapon ability from the Sorcerer class line. This is in Dark Magic, and this is the first ability. So Crystal Frags is the Magicka morph, and now Crystal Weapon is the Stamina morph. This is a pretty huge change that Sorcerer's got in the Stonethorn DLC. And I reviewed it when it came out. I didn't think too much of it, But now that I've used it on a few builds, I actually am starting to like it more. This thing weaves with your light attacks very cleanly. It feels good to cast this ability. It does pretty good damage and it also has some nice utility. Check this out. Number one, it reduces the target's armor by 1,000 for 5 seconds. This can be pretty nice for group situations and even solo builds. I do like that. And then for sustain, this is amazing because look at the bottom. After casting, your next non-ultimate ability used within 3 seconds costs 10% less. So stamina sorcerers are basically the kings of cost reduction if you're using this plus our stamina sorcerer passives. Yeah, we get a lot of cost reduction on this build, making it extremely easy to sustain even with no stamina recovery at all, essentially. So I do really like this ability on the setup. It's a good DPS skill. Definitely check it out if you haven't yet. Next up, we just have a couple of passive buffs, starting with Bound Armaments. Now, this is another stamina ability. It's the last skill in the Daedric Summoning class line, and it's the Stamina Morph. So you can use this a couple of different ways. On the basic, super easy setup, I am just using this as a passive, okay? Now, yes, you can cast this and you get basically an extra damaging ability. Every 4 times you light attack, you get 4 daggers, which you can cast on an enemy doing bonus damage. Now, the damage, honestly, is not that great. I wish they would buff the damage of Bound Armaments because it's very similar overall to just casting an extra crystal weapon. So the fact that I have to keep this up and then rebuff it and then cast it every 4 light attacks, I think it's debatable, especially if you're not experienced on whether this is better for your DPS. You might actually get better DPS just not casting it and using it for the passives. So that's what I'm going to recommend initially is just put it on your bar for the passives because the passives are great. 8% increased max stamina and light attacks deal 10% more damage. Okay, on this build, light attacks are the second highest DPS of this build. Light attacks are huge, and so just slotting Bound Armaments is going to improve that even more. Obviously, if you're more experienced, you can try to cast this every 4 light attacks for a little bit of extra bonus damage if you want. You can add that to the rotation. And then finally, our last normal ability is going to be the Unstable Clanfear, also from the Daedric Summoning skill line. This is our pet. He does physical damage. He also gives you a nice little mini burst heal that costs magicka, and he remains with you. So what I like about this is just like Bound Armaments, you don't have to cast it. Basically, he will do damage as long as you are attacking. He's going to be attacking as well. So you don't even have to think about it. This is essentially free DPS. And it's pretty good damage overall, so definitely use it. And in terms of the ultimate, I've got the Greater Storm Atronach here. That is also from the Daedric Summoning skill line, so we're using 3 of these abilities. And this Atronach ultimate is pretty good overall. Even though it's dealing shock damage, it does pretty high damage per second. It also has a very nice group synergy. The Charged Lightning synergy gives a ally Major Berserk for 8 seconds. That's basically one of the strongest damage buffs in the game that you can give to your group. So I find this to be really effective for the DPS setup, and it lasts a long time too, 28 seconds. So it's well worth it in my opinion. So that is the skills on the 1-bar setup. Let's do a quick rotation here just to see how it works. In terms of the buffs, all you have to do is maintain your potion. That's literally it. And then let's talk about the abilities. So starting off with Hurricane. So you're going to do Light Attack, Hurricane. And then a Light Attack, Barb Trap. And then you're going to weave in Crystal Weapon with light attacks because it needs a light attack to fire. And then that is basically it. That's the rotation. Now, when your buffs start to go up, down, like you see my Hurricane's going to drop right there. Going to rebuff Hurricane and then do Crystal Weapon until Barb Trap is ready to drop. Barb Trap dropped, so I'm going to reapply Trap. Then do more Crystal Weapons until I have to buff Hurricane. Hurricane is dropping, so I'm going to recast it. More Crystal Weapons. So you can see it's kind of like a dynamic rotation. I'll cast Trap a little bit early. Go back to Crystal Weapon. Hurricane is about to drop, recast. And then basically whenever your ultimate is ready, go ahead and fire that guy off like that. And there you go. That is the basic rotation. Again, all you have to do is keep an eye on your buffs. your 2 damage over time effects Hurricane. When that drops, recast it. And when Barb Trap is getting low, recast that. You want to recast Barb Trap a little bit early because it does take about 2 seconds to fully go into effect. So you can cast it at about 4 to 5 seconds left on the timer, and you should be good to go. All right, so that's the extremely easy 1-bar setup. How would you change this for more damage and using 2 skill bars? Obviously, you'll need a backup weapon, and I think you can use 2 options. You can either use bow or you can use dual wield. Both of them are relatively the same in terms of strength. I think bow is a little bit easier to get because you can now get the Maelstrom's bow on normal Maelstrom Arena. So that's what I would recommend because this will give you a nice boost to the 2-bar DPS. So just make sure if you do have a bow on the back that it's infused with a weapon damage enchant. That would be probably the best way to go in my opinion. And that's all you need for the 2-bar setup. Now, how would you adjust the skills? Well, the only thing I would change on the front bar is I would move Barb Trap to the back. So now you have a free skill available on your front bar, right? So keeping it super easy, you can just put a passive here. You can just put a Fighter's Guild skill here. For example, Ring of Preservation. This gives you an additional heal for you and your group, plus minor protection, so it's pretty nice group heal. You can also put an Execute here because we are running 2-handed, and you can decide to run Executioner from the 2-handed skill line as an Execute. Executioner is great because it does do bonus damage the lower health your enemy is, and it is super cheap to cast as well. Only 1,500 stamina. So up to you how you want to do the front bar. That's the 2 main options I would recommend. And then for the back bar, just use some bow abilities. We've got Endless Hail from the bow skill line. That's the second ability there. I went with Endless Hail for the longer duration, just because I want to be on my front bar as much as possible. Because of how strong Crystal Weapon is, I want to make sure I'm spamming that ability as much as I can. So Endless Hail lets me do that because it's a longer duration. Then we've got Poison Injection. That's the last skill in the bow skill line. Does do some nice bonus damage the lower health your enemy is. Obviously, this has a shorter duration, only 10 seconds, so you probably will not have 100% uptime on Poison Injection, but that's okay. And then, like we said, we're going to move Barb Trap to the back bar, so that's the same skill. And then I have literally the same skills here as well, Bound Armaments for the passive light attack damage and max stamina. And then we have our Unstable Clan Fear Pet, because he needs to be double barred, so you must have him on the back bar if you're using the 2-bar setup. And then finally, the ultimate here, Flawless Dawnbreaker from the Fighters Guild skill line. This is much cheaper than your Greater Storm Atronach. So if you need a quick ultimate, let's say the battle is almost over, then you can most likely have enough ultimate to cast Flawless Dawnbreaker for some extra damage. So that would be the 2-bar setup. Extremely easy. Again, we're only adding basically 2 to 3 more damaging abilities, and that is it. So in terms of the 2-bar setup, again, the only buffs you have are your Potion and Hurricane. And then I'm going to wait till Hurricane has about 5 seconds left and then do my back bar dots. So Barb Trap, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Bar Swap, Rebuff Hurricane, and then spam Crystal Weapon again till we have about 5 to 6 seconds left on Hurricane, then Bar Swap back, Barb Trap, Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Rebuff Hurricane, Crystal Weapon, spammy spam. Super easy again. That's the 2-bar setup. Okay, so we've shown a super easy 1-bar rotation. We talked about 2 skill bars if you want to increase the damage. Let's talk about passives next because these are actually very strong on the Stamina Sorcerer now. Starting in the Dark Magic skill line, Unholy Knowledge is excellent. Make sure you pick this one up for the extra cost reduction. 6% cost reduction of all your abilities is awesome. Now, Blood Magic is not a new passive, but it now works on your Stamina Sorcerer. Basically, anytime you hit an enemy with Dark Magic, you heal for about 2,000 health, and this can crit, by the way. So this works with Crystal Weapon because it is a Dark Magic skill. So now you have a very reliable, free passive heal on your Stamina Sorcerer. This is actually very good. Even if you're just starting off in the game, you're brand new, some extra self-healing for free is amazing. So make sure you get Blood Magic as soon as possible. It's great. Persistence is pretty decent. If you're taking damage, you can block and your next ability is cheaper. And then Exploitation, this is more of a group buff. If you have casters, magic builds in your group, then you can increase their spell critical by 1320. It's pretty good for this group build. In Daedric Summoning, these are pretty good as well. These are great as well. You get some extra resources when your pet dies. You do get the reduced cost of ultimates, which is very strong, 15% off your ultimates. Daedric Protection, you do get extra stamina and health recovery, which is very nice. And then Expert Summoner, 8% bonus health. We have extremely high health on this build for a DPS setup, and part of that is this passive. Make sure you put 2 points here. It's definitely worth it. And then our final class skill line, Storm Calling. We do get extra Magicka recovery. Remember, Magicka you do use on this build for your pet heal. So this will be useful probably. And then you do get the energized extra physical and shock damage. That's worth 2 points for sure. Amplitude is interesting. This actually does more damage the lower health your enemy is. So I would recommend getting this as soon as you can. Very good passive as well. And then Expert Mage is awesome, you guys. Increases your weapon and spell damage by 2% for each sorcerer ability slotted. You can see we have 10% bonus weapon damage just on the front bar. That's amazing. In terms of weapon passives, you will want all of your two-handed passives as well as bow or dual-wield passives, however you're using the back bar. This is a medium armor build, so all of your medium armor passives, though you can always save 2 points on sneak if you want. Fighters Guild, you will want all of these because we are going to use probably at least one Fighters Guild ability on each bar. So Intimidating Presence, that's going to reduce the cost of that barb trap, for example, by 15%. That's worth the point. Slayer does give you some bonus weapon damage. Banish the Wicked, you get extra ultimate back when killing undead. And then Skilled Tracker, that's going to do even more damage on either your Dawnbreaker or your trap, so get that one too. Undaunted, if you have these maxed out, you can get more overall resources back from synergies and more max stats, so definitely recommend those. PvP, not necessary. Racial passives, definitely get these. And then Alchemy Medicinal Use to make your potions last as long as possible. In terms of the champion points, starting in the green tree, 37 Warlord, 21 Sprinter, 100 into Mooncalf, 56 into Shadow Ward and Tumbling. In the blue tree, 51 Master at Arms, 16 Physical Weapon Expert, 48 Thaumaturge, 66 Precise Strikes, 33 Piercing, 56 into Mighty. Then in the red tree, 81 Ironclad, 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 40 into Thick-Skinned, and 37 Quick Recovery. Let's talk about the outfit style if you're curious about how the armor is set up on this build. Very simple for the helmet. That is the heavy Teseki. And then all of my body pieces are going to be heavy Worm Cult, which looks like this. So that's going to be for the chest, legs, hands, waist, and feet. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this easy Stam Sorc PvE build for the Stonethorn DLC. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. Of course, if you did, don't forget to crush that like button for me. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you're subscribed for even more ESO build videos just like this one. I have plans for a few more DPS builds for group gameplay coming out soon. And if you'd like to see anything related to that, make sure you let me know in the comments section below. I will be checking that. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe, and I will see you around in the next video.